Hi there, we are in the Bitcoin Design Guide Jam session number 29. And as usual, we will chat about the current progress on the design guide, the roadmap, current milestones, and then we'll hop into a few details. Today, it'll probably be Stephen's post about the manual channel backup. So, hey everyone, thanks for joining today. So, let's take a quick look at our awesome roadmap here. Or actually, before doing that, is there anything else you'd like to chat about? Anything urgent that requires the presence of people in a video chat?
No.
I think I'm good.
Look, we can close milestone 13 while we're on the call right now. It's done.
Yes, that is excellent. So just earlier, let's take a look. Milestones 13, 0 open, 17 closed. Excellent. Let's close this one here.
It disappeared entirely from the roadmap.
Yeah, I think if there are no more open, there's a filter applied here for only open issues, and if there are no open ones, then it just disappears. Then we have so awesome, congratulations, nice work. All that was the one about lightning refinements, and it just took a bunch of time to figure out the details. That was milestone 13. In the meantime, we already finished 14 and 15. So now we have 16, which we're also, I think we're coming into the, what do you call that, in the closing, when there's a race or so, like the closing lane or something, finishing lane lap, whatever.
Sounds reasonable.
Sounds reasonable. Okay.
I don't know much about races, but
okay. So let's start from top to bottom real quick. Section landing page. I don't think there's anything urgent happening right now, and we decided that will come a little bit later.
Yeah.
Because that's more like once we have all the sub pages done, then it'll be easier to update the landing page and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
First use page. Bosch, thank you for giving that review and approval. I asked Daniel earlier to take a look because I don't think he's been involved with this, so that would be kind of a fresh perspective on it too, I think. And then, or Stephen or anyone else, if you'd like to review, that is not a to-do anymore. That is very well in progress. But then it would be awesome if we could wrap that one up.
Yeah, I have a review in progress right now. I should be done with it after this call.
Awesome. And then requesting, Bosch, you're working on this one.
Yeah, I've got a PR open for it. It's just in draft mode. I made a comment. Like it's mostly done, but the first half or maybe first 3/4 is ready for review by you guys. I just got to tweak the last bit, and also just want some general feedback about kind of the structure. Like I kind of went with having that like advanced section at the bottom that kind of covered some more like extra stuff, and this will be the first page that we kind of done that with. So I wanted to kind of get some feedback if that makes sense. It's just kind of like sectioned off, and it for the requesting it mentions like invoice expirations, and I was maybe going to just briefly cover like on-chain addresses that aren't swap addresses. So if people want to have users generating their own on-chain addresses and receiving, but that could open a big can of worms, because then if they do that, then they have to manually open a channel, and then you have to worry about all that. So I wasn't too sure, but it's pretty much ready for review. Like I updated all the images and stuff, so they pretty much match the UI kit completely now. I don't think I really changed them much at all. So.
Okay, let's take a quick look here. But you said that it's in draft still, right?
Yeah, just need to like kind of go through and tweak a few things, but I'd say it's mostly done. Like it's pretty much done. It was more the general structure, like if it kind of flowed, made sense. Like I did a lot of the heavy lifting off to the formats page. So originally I had a lot of the details outlined in this page, rather because we've kind of explained all that in the formats page. I didn't go into detail in all the different I didn't even like really mention all different types of payment request formats. I just mentioned all the different ways you can generate them and like present them and share them. And then I kind of linked off and like said like, oh, you can do like there's a section, very small section on subscriptions, and I said, oh, you can do this with offers, and I just kind of link off to the offers page. But that was one bit I didn't really know as well. The subscription part on this page, it's kind of getting a little bit out of the scope of just straight up plain requesting, but in a lot of ways it is. But it probably, like, requesting could almost have its own dedicated page in Daily Spending Wallet. Like, there's a whole lot of like UX, UI quirks that kind of go into that, and it's pretty unexplored. Like, there's no wallets we can kind of look at to kind of learn from. But I had just a small section on there for now. Like, it's just something, but I don't know. Maybe I might even remove that because it's a little bit getting out of the scope of just straight up requesting. And but yeah, I just added something in there.
It's not really a request, right? It's like an auto pay, auto send in a way.
Yeah, well, it's automatically requesting payments from people.
Oh, the other side is requesting. Yeah, it's not the wallet initiating; it's the other side is requesting it.
Yeah, so the person who generates the offer is sending a request to the sender, and then they still have to pay it. But they could automate it. They could automate it on their end if they wanted to. But yeah, you're still like kind of sending a request to someone.
Yeah, but that is still non-existent tech, right? That's
yeah.
Is there any early version of this that's
No.
workable?
No, I don't think so.
Terminus
but
Pay.
like, you know, we can look ahead. It's fun. Yeah, Terminus Pay maybe. Actually, I haven't looked at that, but I don't think it's. I've only used it in the context of offers, so I kind of focus on what parameters offers has.
It was a joke. Terminus Pay was a hackathon project me and my friends worked on, and we got Bolt 12 offers working on reg test on a local like 3-node reg test network.
That's how it starts.
Man, that's it. That's it. That's what we can talk about. Yeah, but there's no UI anywhere for offers for subscriptions, but something fun to look into. But
yeah, I feel like that could be its own page because you do want notifications and potentially approval.
Even like a case study. I know we still need to kind of create the case study section again and add stuff to it. Like we could work on a subscriptions case study.
Case studies are for studies of external projects, like real world projects, where the reference design is like a made up blueprint in a way. But it could be just a subpage.
But yeah, feel free to get around to giving feedback on that when you guys have some time. It's no huge rush. I'll probably do a few updates over the next few days. So
cool. Let's take a look at it.
And do we need to just at some point, not now, discuss this general how and when we present fees to the user?
I think that's a very good point, Christoph. That's a very, very important point. That came up in Blixt as well as in the research that I'm doing now as well, to decide when to actually show users the educate them about the fees. And thanks for telling me about the call, Bosch, because I had no idea we actually had a call today.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. So I get, because I was the one that bring it up about the fees, because it gets a bit like, say if you have a unified request shown, and how do you explain the fees in that context? Because both of those, it's obviously got a swap address and an invoice. Both have very different fee structures, but it's just one payment request. So how can you be like, okay, we've got this one payment request, but depending on how it's paid, the fees are going to be different. Like it's a bit of a quirky kind of thing to explain. And then you could just say like, there's two payment request formats here, these two options, but then you're kind of really diverging from the benefits that kind of unified QR codes give. Because then you're starting to have to explain that there's on-chain and there's Lightning, and then you're just kind of going back to the Moon kind of toggle mode really, and yeah, I think you lose a lot of those benefits there, but the fees kind of make it complicated.
Are there no opportunities to show the fees contextually, depending on what they're doing?
Yeah, the tricky thing is just that here in this QR code, there are two ways to pay in there, and based on what the other person ends up doing, they may have to pay or you may have to pay something because of what's happening under the hood and how the whole thing is processed and put into your wallet. And it could be different amounts that are not really 100% predictable. That's what makes it so iffy.
Let's break this down a little bit. So, you have this QR code. There's two different payment formats inside of it, on-chain and Lightning. Now, the bulk of the fee is really going to be on the side of the sender. So It's in the form of a lightning payment, just at, paying each hop along the path, or just a typical on-chain fee that gets collected by a miner. So the fees you mostly have to worry about, I think, are on the side of the sender, and I would expect that to happen after they scan the QR code and it comes up with some kind of a finalized transaction screen that says, da 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 da, do you want to send this? This is, your fee, blah blah blah. I think the only part in question where there might be a fee on the recipient side is, like we talked about, if this is very easy to use daily spending wallet, and as Christoph outlines in his first use PR, this thing uses submarine swaps to automatically sweep the user's funds into Lightning. That's the one place where a fee might come into account for the recipient. So that's the one situation that we're really concerned about is if there's if they present this QR code and someone ends up using the on-chain fee. So I'm thinking out loud, so it helps me understand. I mean, maybe there's a way, maybe one way to think about this, maybe the fee is presented the first time they turn on the app, and it just, I don't know, lets them know that anytime somebody pays them on chain, there's that fee. Or maybe it's the sort of thing where what if for the on-chain side of it in the QR code, you can specify metadata for what the amount is. What if the on-chain portion had a higher amount specified in there to account for the swap fee?
And
So I was thinking
what we
about
need to talk through.
So, because the receiver, if the receiver needs a channel, which they may or may not, it's contextual depending on if they have enough inbound, which they may not know as well because they may not know the incoming payment amount. I thought, like, how I was thinking of addressing it in this page was, I was going to address it in the receiving page, and what you could do is, considering using a swap, the Lightning Wallet server can send a notification to the user saying, hey, there's a payment incoming, this is how much it's going to cost, and then the user okays it before they accept it. That's kind of how I was thinking of addressing it, because that way you don't have to detail all the fees on the request page. They can get the repayment coming in, they get a notification saying, hey, this is going to cost you X amount based on if they need a channel, how much the swap service fee is, and then the user can accept it. And then if the Lightning Wallet, so if you say no, the Lightning Wallet server just doesn't do the swap, channel isn't opened. If you say yes, obviously, yeah, channel open, swap happens. That's how I thought you'd say you'd be combining notifications and a swap kind of service in top of that. But that's how I was thinking about addressing that. But yeah.
Cool. Let's figure it out. Probably not on this call, but I have a hard time visualizing everything that we're discussing here already. I'm just going to take a note here real quick. Because what I pulled up here in the background is some notification that Phoenix has at the very beginning. Then, hold on, I just switched to something else here. There's stuff here in the initial deposit, and then it might be very different when you're making payment requests later on. So let's just talk through. Let's create a document, write down what could happen, different variations how we could tackle it, and then I'm sure that will lead us to some good approach.
Yeah, because I'm working on the receiving page. I was planning to get the PR for that up this week, so maybe it will make a little bit more sense. Like, I was kind of working through that and thinking about on that side of things. But yeah, we can come back to that. I'm sure there's a big lot of stuff to talk about. So
yeah, I think this is also something where because fees pop up occasionally, sometimes in weird ways in different places in the application. Not in weird ways, but it's not like a consistent element that's always there. So we might need to explain the rationale, the logic behind it very clearly, because otherwise it's not obvious, like why this shows up in certain places, why it is worded that way, why specific numbers are in there.
yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on fees?
No.
It's a tricky one. Okay, cool, but awesome to see that page.
I have a one about fees because I'd be curious how the fees would be, conveyed to the users in a very easy to understand way that's not using too much of text. I really noticed that in the research, all these fees, they're having to explain it using a minimum of a whole paragraph, which is, it takes up 1/3 of the entire interface, the entire screen. I don't know if there's ways to make that tidier or
Fees may apply. Click to learn more.
click here to learn more. Yeah, just fees may apply. Click here to learn more. They can always go back to that screen state if they want to read the details.
Yeah. That seems reasonable to me. Some approach like that, because the thing about it is, I think we see this in practice with pretty much any other kind of financial application. People really like, I think, the convenience of a product that's easy to set up but has some fees. Like if you really are like super into technology and accounting and stuff like that, you will research every single credit card processor on the planet, find the one with the best fee structure for your business, have your IT team set it up, right? Okay, but that's not most people. Most people are just like, I'm going to order the Square reader or get a Stripe account, and whatever 1%, 2%, whatever the fee is, I'm just going to pay that fee because that's easier for me to grasp than dealing with all of that other stuff. And so ultimately people use services like Stripe and Square because they'd rather pay that tiny fee than care about what's going on. So I think you can totally just say something like, fees apply, click here to learn more.
I love that because it's really, in terms of just keeping the UI nice and tidy and nice and non-overwhelming. It's just, I'm seeing so many paragraphs of text as I'm going through the research now. It's mind-boggling how much of it's just almost encyclopedia long, having to scroll down to read everything that the developer thinks is important for the user to understand.
If it's easily accessible, I think it's fine. It's just when other well-known wallets that never mention what their fees are anywhere ever in any of their documentation, website, application, and then you kind of have to try it out and then get annoyed because the fees are actually really high.
100%.
Or figure it out from a post on Reddit. That's not so pleasant.
It's like it's almost like what we're saying is that the wallet, the Lightning service provider, whatever it is we're talking about, should be transparent and should disclose what the user is being charged. But that doesn't necessarily need to be in your face, front and center. Just like the user should be able to find that information somewhere, but you don't necessarily need to bother them with that all the time.
Fully agree.
I still really reckon all these wallets will probably do like a subscription kind of type model where people just pay like $10 a month and then they don't have to worry about any of those details ever and worry about channels. That's kind of where I think things will go. That's why I've been liking that Fediment stuff lately, because then obviously paying $10 a month locks out a lot of people who don't have that kind of money, but then people could set up their own little Fediment like within their family and just have one member pay the $10 a month and just have like a little mini bank account like between their family members that uses Fediment, and then you have one account for that. That's completely off topic, but yeah.
But is it the Lightning fees, like as I'm doing the testing and just like I'm sending money from Phoenix to Breeze and then I send back from Breeze to Phoenix, like the fees seem quite small, so it almost feels like if it's such a small amount, a user's not going to be getting too excited about it.
So there's also a little bit of, I think for very low amounts, there's a little bit of subsidy happening.
Yeah.
Where some of those wallets, they're like, okay, you send 10 sats, we're just gonna let you do that. But then once there's a certain over €5 or 50 or 100 or so, that then the fees increase a little bit. So I think there are some dynamics that are happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
There's also like Phoenix and Breeze are two pretty big nodes, so like they're probably well connected. So there's probably only like going 2 hops between them. So if you were sending like 6 hops or however many extra more, it'd cost a lot more. If you say if you're sending to someone who's running their own node and they weren't really connected to Phoenix or Breeze and had to hop around the network, that's when fees are gonna vary quite a bit.
Gotcha.
That is a good point.
Okay, cool. Very good discussion around fees. Do we keep talking about fees, or
No, we'll
I've
probably
got
spend the rest of the call on fees if we do that.
I opened an issue on GitHub around kind of what we're talking about right now the other day. So if anyone wants to go like put their thoughts in there, but you're more than welcome to. So.
this one here? This one? Fee controls? No?
Yeah, fee controls. I guess we can just talk about lots of fee related stuff there.
Okay.
Sweet.
Okay, cool. So the requesting backup and recovery, Stephen, this is the big one. You posted on Slack video, which was really great overview. You had a lot of questions and thoughts in there. Do you want to just give like if we were to talk about this right now, what would be the most helpful? Where are you?
Yeah. So I think you brought up some good points in the discussion, Christoph, on Slack after my video that, one, if the user is, if they do opt to doing the manual backup.
Sorry, Stephen, before you go, does everybody know what this post was about? Or do we need to summarize it?
Yeah, I'll summarize real quickly. Yeah, I mean, we're basically looking at, in this milestone here, milestone 16, we're kind of updating all of these pages to flesh out this prototype. So, how Christoph had the first use PR and Bosch was working on the requesting. I'm working on the backup and recovery section. And, so it's kind of a lengthy section. It's actually, so it looks like a small thing. It's like just one issue, but it's really like 4 pages. So it's like all of this. And, typically we try and steer users into automatic cloud backup. It just makes sense for Lightning. You kind of need that frequent backup of channel state for Lightning, but also just kind of out of the principle of it, also recommend, that, you allow some kind of manual backup for the user. And so I was just really trying to, the video I kind of recorded was just, we don't have really enough detail on this page about what this flow looks like. So I was trying to flesh out that flow a lot, get it more consistent with the UI kit, just really show every single step of that. And I was just kind of narrating about, some of the kind of questions that I ran into while I was, building this flow out. I think one of the kind of questions that was chief of my mind is like, how much detail do we want to go into with this flow? Is there a point at which some of this information isn't really useful? One of the ones in particular that I've always been a kind of a fan of is asking the user to make sure they have their derivation path and their fingerprint backed up. I think that if they only have the recovery phrase, they don't have enough to back up their wallet with another app, for instance, because this number, may differ from the default derivation path of that app. But I think you brought up and so one of the things that I guess I was concerned about is I was like, look, we determined with Lightning wallets that you really can't back up. You can't really restore a Lightning wallet in another app. It's just the difference between the different Lightning implementations. There's not really an interoperable channel backup state between them all. So we have to kind of assume with Lightning that they're going to be restoring their wallet from the same application. But you brought up 2 good, things that I thought were really insightful, Christoph. You said one that, we just have to assume if the user is doing a manual backup that they're committing themselves to doing a harder process. Like if you're doing a manual backup, there's just like, you can't sugarcoat it. There's just certain details that have to be recorded. And if you're, going to opt out of the automatic cloud backup, that's fine. But, we're not going to sugarcoat this for you. This is all the information you need. The other thing you brought up which I thought was a good point, is that we can't just always be preparing for these scenarios like I was preparing for here, which was user loses new phone, user gets new phone, user downloads the same wallet app. What if it's a situation where the app goes offline, the LSP goes offline, for whatever reason? Hopefully that doesn't happen. But if you really do want to treat this like a cash-like instrument and you want the user to be prepared to restore their funds in any situation, yeah, the manual backup would be the method by which you would have them prepared to do that. The manual backup is almost like this total doomsday scenario where there's no other means by which to restore it. So if you want to be prepared for that scenario, you do kind of want stuff like the derivation path and the fingerprint, and you're basically assuming that because the LSP and the app have completely crashed, that there has to be a way for them to restore funds. So now that I say all this stuff out loud, it almost seems to me like you would want to steer the user to some direction, like something like what Moon has, like the kind of emergency recovery kit, and all of that. So I'm almost kind of wondering if I should be mocking up some kind of flow in here that like really kind of prepares for like a catastrophic scenario, something like this, but we're really preparing for like, what if the app and the LSP have gone offline? So that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm almost kind of wondering if I need to flesh this out with even more detail now.
Yeah. Question there. The moving to a different app.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the way, is it the difference between, what are the different ones, like LND and C Lightning or whatever they're called, those different implementations? Is that where the compatibility is missing?
Yes, that is absolutely where the compatibility is missing. There's not for your channel state backup, there's not a compatible format between all of those different implementations.
But if I go from LND to LND, it'd be fine.
Yes, if you go from LND to LND, my understanding is that would be okay. But then we also have to imagine that now, like with like LDK, you got like, Sensei using LDK and stuff like that. So that's like another, I would assume that's another channel backup format. So it's like so if you go from LND to LND, that would be okay. And
we should test that, because I'm not sure if that would work. I don't know. I think it would, but we could do that between Blix and Breeze. They're both LND.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. That was kind of the next thing I wanted to bring up, is that like technically it should be possible to restore channel state between two LND wallets. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that, the like UI layer sitting on top of LND in those wallets is necessarily like set up to be able to perform that kind of backup, So I don't want to go and make like the claims that like, Breeze and Blixt and whatever are suddenly like have interoperable backups just because they're both using LND. The fact we're in right now is that Lightning is just such a complicated beast that it's not as simple to, swap backup between wallets in the same way that you can with an on-chain wallet and a recovery phrase.
But I mean, this is a reference design, so we can look a little bit into the utopian future, I guess.
Yeah.
Where we could say that the backup is not intended for just restoration in this exact same application, maybe on a different device, but it serves the double purpose for the application going away, not being accessible, blocked by your government, whatever it is that you need, that this allows you to stay in control of your funds, and that there are some difficulties and lack of compatibilities, but that's for the application designer, architect to make sure that there's some type of other way to get things.
A big thing where there isn't interoperability is there's a working group working on LSP API standard. So you're going to have interoperability between LSPs, but with Lightning Wallet servers, you won't have interoperability between wallets at all, because those servers are tied to their wallets that those service providers offer. So like a Lightning Wallet server, like with, say for example with Phoenix, part of their Lightning Wallet server infrastructure is they send you a notification when they've got a payment like HTLC that they're holding for you, and that indicates that you need to log on so you can receive that payment. Whereas if you recovered, say, Phoenix in Breeze, the Lightning Wallet server is not connected to the Breeze wallet, and I don't think they probably will be at any point. So, like that's just something to just consider.
So I think you
That's
might
to figure
be
out.
overcomplicating this a little bit. Excuse me for saying so, but
Please.
in the sense that I think with this being a reference design, like we talked about this last week with Daniel, and it was the view that like if you're doing a reference design, you kind of need to take a bunch of opinions and say this is how we're implementing things in this reference design, and not get too hung up in all the different ways that you could implement this. So I think that there's probably space in the how things work part of the Bitcoin design guide to look at what are all the different ways that you can affect the backup and restore, and like what are those different flows and what are the trade-offs of each, and that's probably a good place to break out all the different flows. And then for this wallet, you probably need a view of, what does the infrastructure look like that supports this wallet? Which particular instance are we assuming we're designing for, and then therefore this is what the backup is going to look like. And then maybe even these are the cases that it just doesn't cater for. Like in my mind, it would be a reasonable principle to say this is a daily spending wallet. We're not assuming that this is all of the funds that you own, and therefore you could lose some of these funds in this instance where your Lightning service provider's gone offline and the software no longer exists. I take that personally as a trade-off balance for daily spending, if that's what the purpose of this is. I wouldn't for the saving, for instance, but for this I would.
Also, what I came across is like with Phoenix makes the users do the backup right in the beginning on the onboarding journey, and Breeze doesn't even do it. Breeze does only recovery phase. So I think that's very interesting as well, is, how do they make the decisions to, one chooses just to do backup and the other one chooses to do recovery phrase. And then with Blixt, we're doing recovery phrase and backup, at least trying to get them to do both, So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with Pete. What Steven's kind of got on the screen right there is kind of the assumptions. I'd add one more as well, Stephen, about the Lightning Wallet servers, which are a little bit different from the Lightning service providers, which do the liquidity side of it. So I would kind of put that as an assumption. We talk about swaps and stuff like that. That's a Lightning Wallet server, not so much a Lightning service provider. Even though they can be the same thing offered by the same person, they're kind of distinct roles. So assume Lightning Wallet server. So if assuming Lightning Wallet server, we should not talk about interoperability between wallets because it's probably not a thing.
Doesn't Breeze back up automatically on Google Drive?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does.
They don't even ask the user. They just back up if they're connected. Yeah, because you use Google Apps to install Breeze, and they just back up it on that account.
I think when I set up Breeze initially, like many years ago, I had to manually set up the iCloud or Google Drive thing, but maybe it's become just automated in the background now.
No, I think you can change it from the default is like Google account, but I think you can change it, and supposedly you can recover it.
Yeah, it's automated.
Yeah, you can recover it somehow without Breeze, but it's, as far as I was looking at it, it's kind of complicated process.
Yeah. So I agree. We definitely need to, and I think one good place for defining product specs and all that is once we kind of have this all fleshed out, just kind of the overview page that we're going to show. Hey, we're going to show you how to build a daily spending wallet. I think it's going to be a great place to kind of go into laying out. Well, this is the specs, and we're kind of assuming that this reference design has this architecture. But yeah, I generally agree with you, Pete. We don't need to, we're not designing for every use case here. We're trying to, build one kind of product design here that, works in specific situations. I think that the problem of interoperability between all wallets is it's a problem that designers can't solve. It's an engineering challenge. I like your idea, Christoph, of just imagining the kind of utopian future, and you're like, well, this is what it would look like if we could get it to work. Right now, if we're going to be laying out an architecture, I'm kind of leaning towards the idea of just I don't know. Again, I think that we have to assume for the most part that if somebody's restoring their wallet, they're restoring with the same app. And I mean, I think just some kind of recovery kit or recovery tool is just a simple solution that, like, doesn't require a lot of, imagination on the part of like how you would engineer it. Just some kind of tool that's like, yes, if we disappeared off the face of the earth, you could use this to recover your funds. But I wouldn't really be interested in going into like too much detail on that, just because it's like, like to Pete's point, you're talking about smaller amounts of funds here and all of that. And so I don't know.
Maybe it's useful to separate these two, like backup recovery flows into like same wallet recovery and external wallet recovery, and even have this recoveries as two positions in menu somewhere. Although like seeing two types of recovery might be confusing as well, but
yeah, we don't have the recovery page thought through very well.
Well, that's my next step.
Yeah. So yeah, but Stephen, do you have enough to move forward? We can also set up a separate call, chat through things, or feel free to share a Google Doc with text we can all edit or comment on. Or...
It's been perfect talking through it with everybody today. I think I've got enough to move forward. I think my next step that I want to do is I don't want to think about this like so granularly, like locking ourselves into like the sequential order. I think the next thing I need to do now is actually work on the recovery flow. So I need to do this, but for recovery, and then we can look at that. I'm approaching this from the angle of like, let's get the flow looking to where it like makes sense. And then worry about what the text on the page says after that. So yeah, my next challenge step is going to be building out the recovery flow in this same document, and then we can take another look at it together from there.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. I'll look over the Figma in a bit more detail in the morning. I haven't looked over it in great detail, so I'll look in the morning as well.
Yeah, just to give you context, like kind of the whole page is just like in its current form is just like saying like, hey, here's a bunch of different ways you could do manual backups. And the kind of new approach is that like we would have a much more detailed flow that kind of goes from start to finish, going, hey, first do this, then do this, da, 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 da. And then kind of how we talked about in these designs, how it would be like, this is the way our reference design does it. But then here's alternate ways you could do it if you're, app has a different architecture, or you just want to make a different decision. So all the other stuff that's on the page, that would be the alternate stuff. So this would be the kind of stuff that goes lower down on the page as like the other ways of handling it. But this would basically be the meat of the page right here.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds awesome. Cool. So on to the next ones. Funding page.
Yeah, so I'm working on that. I still kind of leaning towards just combining this and calling it receiving, and combining the content that was in the requesting page in with this. I think it should be fine, considering a lot of the detail that's in the funding page currently, I'll probably reference to the Lightning Services page. So I'll be able to chop a lot of the stuff out that's actually in the reference design. So I'll be able to fit it in. But like there's such similar concepts. I think having a funding and a receiving page just has overlap, and you kind of cover the funding a little bit in your first use PR as well. So if we had funding, receive, and content in first use, it would be making a bit of redundant content, I think. So that's kind of where I was going with that. I'm probably like 30-40% through that page, but I was going to get it up this week.
Yeah, I'm wondering if let's see. So I feel like there's some stuff there that we could keep, because the funding here, or called initial deposit, it's just to these two screens, and there's a little bit of text, actually a little bit more, but there's no explanation of what happens behind the scenes and why it's actually such a sensitive, complicated, slightly costly thing. And you have that detailed out very well here. So I'm just wondering if this funding could be a subpage of the first use, just to elaborate on that. Show some of those screen variations, maybe show a manual option, or I don't know.
Yeah, could potentially be. I'll have to think about that some more. But yeah, like I was gonna just cover that kind of tidbit in the page though. But yeah, I'll have to think about it some more. But yeah, that could be a way to go about that actually.
Or maybe we split this one up in two and merge it into other pages, but it just, I'll have to take another look there too.
Because
Okay.
you do like you cover like the deposit request in the first use, and then I was going to kind of jump straight from that end of first use straight into the receiving, or straight into the receiving page, and then kind of talk about what happens when the payment actually comes in. That's where I was going to talk about Lightning Wallet servers, like sending a notification. I was going to talk about payment channel if it needs to be opened, which it obviously would be, continue on with first use, and then kind of later in the page talk about consecutive receives, like, and maybe not go into detail on liquidity, but I referenced into Steven's page that he did on liquidity.
Yep.
And people go read that, but it should make sense. It'll kind of piece it together in Figma.
Yeah, it'll be easier once we see all the pages or drafts or so next to
Yeah.
each other. We can kind of click through and see. That's the tricky one with this milestone, is that everything is just so interlinked.
Bosh, I was just wondering, because you also had a look at the Figma file this morning. I haven't seen that page, but is it useful also to mention that some apps refer to it as swap in? Because, it seems that this is, one app uses swap in and the other app uses,
Yeah, so in the requesting PR I've got up, there's a section called swap addresses, which I cover that concept of what a swap address is, and I explain how it's pretty much say it's a regular on-chain address, except it's controlled by a server, and when a payment gets received to it, it gets swapped to Lightning, into the user's control. I think they should just call it swap address. I don't think you need to call it swap in. But you can swap out and swap into Lightning, but for a daily spending wallet user, they'd probably swap address probably would cover what they need. If they were swapping out, they'd probably just be swapping out to their own address. You probably wouldn't call it a swap out address. You just say send it to your own address, and it would do the swap behind the scene. But for receiving, you'd have to say receiving on-chain and daily spending, you'd have to be a swap address. But yeah, there's a little bit of content on that in the requesting page if you want to have a look at it.
Yeah, I'll have a look. And any other thoughts on a different word for swap in? Because I'll be very honest, when I first landed on the page that said swap in, being a non-Lightning wallet user, I was very confused. I didn't know what swap in was. I was.
Yeah, I mean that's a big discussion. I think we've had some Slack threads on that also.
Yeah.
Around this whole idea, or one thing was limits, and then increasing your limit, and that just costs a fee. Like, you don't even mention anything like a swap address. You just hide all that stuff altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd definitely drop it in and just call it a swap address as starters. That's probably still not that super clear, but there definitely needs to be a distinction, because the user doesn't control that address. So you can't just say, oh, it's an on-chain address, because the user doesn't control it. It is different.
You don't want to share it. You think like, oh, that's my address, I'm going to share it with random people.
Yeah. Which they actually can, but if the Lightning Wallet server disappeared and then you shared this address and people sending payments to it, that money would be gone forever.
If you wanted to receive Bitcoin on chain, is there a reason you don't just receive it on chain and then instantly open a channel? I don't quite understand why you're doing a swap.
I mean, a large part of this kind of reference design is trying to make it, the trying to envision like the easiest possible, Lightning wallet that you could give to somebody and they could start spending with it immediately. Think about like something like a traditional kind of fintech app like Cash App or something. Could it be as easy to set up and use as that? And so like part of that is trying to take away channel management as much as possible. And so swapping was one solution to that is just they have one or two channels with an LSP, and then beyond that you're just taking the on-chain funds and sweeping them into their channel.
That's a good point, Pete. One way you could do it that I think it would probably be a better way to do it in the future would be to do it with like a dual funded channel, and just like it was an on-chain address, and it just went in and it just opened a dual funded channel, and the LSP just gave you inbound liquidity, and you didn't have to worry about a Lightning Wallet server and the trust trade-offs and that and things like that.
I mean, for me, I would just receive it into the Lightning, because the Lightning wallets have like a Bitcoin on-chain capability as well. I would just receive into that and then automatically open the channel.
If the amount is high enough that it is larger than the channel opening fees, because you don't want every time you receive a small amount, like end up with 50 different channels that are just really tiny.
But you need the channel either way, right? So you've either got incoming capacity in Lightning. I mean, the other option is you just don't receive anything on chain. You just always broadcast the Lightning invoice and force the sender to do the swap on their end.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these are complicated scenarios. Like, I mean, I see where you're coming from. These are complicated scenarios that I think depend on like they depend on the variables of the unique situation. It's like to Christophe's point about like, yeah, if you every time you received like a somewhat smaller on-chain fee, if it just turned it into a channel every single time, then you just end up with a ton of tiny channels. Maybe that wouldn't be a big of a deal if I don't know, you could multipath payments were a little more widespread and easier, and you could just have all these tiny channels. I think in the current world we operate in, I think that the one kind of more well-funded channel, like having a larger or more well-funded channel is probably the better path in terms of routing a successful payment. But I acknowledge I could be wrong on that, and the kinds of things we think are beneficial now could change as Lightning continues to grow. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this might be one of those things where I might not be envisioning it right. It's a bit later here. Intuitively, it just doesn't seem like you win anything by trying to do a swap. Like, it just seems like it adds a lot of complexity there. But I might just be missing a whiteboard and half an hour.
Part of it too is just making it so that the user's funds are immediately spendable on Lightning versus having them have to have two balances. So like, if you don't perform the swap, that could be totally fine too. You would just have a wallet that essentially has two balances. You have an on-chain balance and then you have a Lightning balance. And so it's kind of like, you then have to, teach the user that like, well, you have this pool of funds and then you have this pool of funds over here. One of them is, spendable very slowly, and then the other one is spendable very quickly. And
yeah, I get it. I think it's really just like having that particular case where somebody wants to pay you in on-chain Bitcoin, but really you've got a Lightning wallet. I mean, I guess my view would be you just don't broadcast an on-chain QR code. You just force them through Lightning. But as I said, I wasn't here for all the previous lecture, so please disregard if this is just.
Yeah, I feel like there was another technical reason, and I can't really think of off the top of my head as to why we kind of went with that path. Because Blix does what you're talking about, Pete, and we kind of decided to not do that a while ago. But I can't exactly remember the exact reason. But one is so that I guess the user doesn't have like heaps of channels getting opened all the time, which can be maybe result in more issues.
Can be expensive.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, multipath payments are not like as widespread. I mean, there's a ton of great research going into like multipath payments, but I just don't know of any like mobile app right now that's just like, successfully, chunking payments through multiple channels. So um, I feel pretty comfortable saying that it's a better benefit to the user to have fewer larger channels than it is to have many smaller channels.
I absolutely agree. I think my point is that in that case I just wouldn't accept on-chain Bitcoin necessarily.
Yeah, and so part of that conversation that was how that about in terms of accepting on-chain Bitcoin is just the idea that like trying to abstract it so that people don't have to worry so much about these different networks and knowing or caring what they are. Some people are not going to like this approach, but I think the approach we've been kind of leaning towards is this idea that like, well, you've got on-chain, you've got off-chain, but they're both Bitcoin, and that the user shouldn't have to, know or care about the differences between the two. It should just be this like seamless experience.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess then maybe the bit to call out is just that you're in that particular payment type, you're adding an extra layer of trust onto the LSP because you literally can't accept that payment without the LSP providing that swap capability.
Yes, correct. That is correct. Yeah, I mean, I think another way of thinking about it too is that like let's say the user does want to like, oh, they've started this food stand and now they're accepting Lightning payments every day, and then they've accumulated wealth over the past year at their food stand. Now they need to offload some of that to cold storage, store their wealth a little more securely. Well, if you don't have some kind of swapping mechanism built into the wallet, that's a UX problem as well, because then they can't get funds off. Like then their funds are stuck in this like daily spending hot Lightning wallet, and so like you need to there needs to be some easy way for them to exit Lightning as well. Or like again, like what if somebody then to bring up the food stall again, like what if somebody they need to accept investment in their business, or they get a really large catering order one day and they need to be able to accept a much larger payment. The person who's paying them has funds on chain, and they're paying them on chain because they're pulling from a larger pool of savings for this larger catering order or whatever. And so that's a situation where they clearly need to be able to accept an on-chain payment, and not being able to accept this larger payment is a detriment to their business. They suddenly have the order that is going to basically make their week, make their month, and they can't accept it because of Lightning liquidity, blah 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 channels. It's like
I got the point. Don't worry. I would probably counter and say that's probably not a daily spending wallet. That's a merchant wallet.
No, but that's what I'm saying is
that point.
That's the point that I'm getting at, though, is that we can't. We sort of, when we silo our applications into these, like, well, you can only use this app for this, this specific situation, then we limit what the user can do. We limit their like ability to grow as a human or as a business or whatever, when we say that you can only use it for this one thing. And like, we have to go ahead and think ahead that maybe we say, oh yeah, the wallet was designed to only accept, $10 a day or $10 a week or whatever. And we say that, and then they're going to get pissed off at a certain point if they realize that, well, my business is growing and I didn't know that I could only use this much money up to a certain point, which is fine if they only can use money up to a certain point. But then there has to be that exit path built in at a certain point. Like, okay, you've reached the limit of this wallet. You need to move to a different type of wallet now. So you need to have a way to be able to, exfiltrate the funds, back on chain. I don't know. I'm just trying to say that, it's kind of like when people, I'll finish this rant. It's like, it was kind of like, back in the early days with mobile, and people were like, oh, well, the mobile website, should only have like 3 pieces of information on it because no one's actually going to surf the web on their mobile phones or make significant orders or make significant life decisions through a mobile phone. And then, before you know it, people are like getting onto these mobile websites that can only do 3 things. And they're like, well, why can't it do this? Why can't I access the whole website? Why can't I place my order? Why can't I read every single page of the website from my phone? You know, and you know, people who built mobile websites in 2008 and 2009 did not foresee that people were eventually going to do every single thing through the mobile website. And now, like, the idea that your website isn't mobile is like, you know, isn't mobile friendly is like this ludicrous thing. I think we had to think the same thing with daily spending Lightning wallets. We can make these assumptions that, yeah, people are going to make tiny payments, but if we want this to be digital cash, we have to assume that they're going to do more and more and more and more and more. And then eventually they're going to be doing everything with the app. So I don't know. That's where I'm coming from. I'm going to shut up.
End of rant.
Well, it depends what your daily spending is, right? If you're like super rich and you buy, like, I don't know, a Ferrari every day or so, then, you know.
Possible. Also possible, you know.
You can spend a lot on a Lightning wallet. I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah.
And you know, Stephen, don't limit people. You know, you never know. Don't
I'm
limit.
sorry about
No, but I think
I'm sorry about that. I hope they all came across constructive, though.
No, for sure. And I think one of the things, you know, as a service provider, you want to be able to have like 99.99% of times it works. And if it's just 98%, a lot of them will just not accept that, I think. That's one of the things. Just make sure it works at all times, even if it's a small percentage. What was that just now? Okay, anyway, so we're almost at the hour here. So let's go real quick through the other pages. There's privacy and security. I assigned myself to them. I briefly looked. I think there are some comments on both of these issues, but I was trying to get the first use page done first, but I'm going to try to get into these this week. And then the prototype will also come afterwards. And that's it. Anything else?
No. I just sent a link. I was showing, for some reason, the wiki for Breeze isn't working, but they have like it all laid out in their wiki is why they don't have an on-chain wallet. That's what I was thinking of, but for some reason it's not popping up on my, like the tabs just disappeared on.
Was it
GitHub.
technical? Because they say that they're like the entry point into the Lightning economy. I think that's kind of the tagline.
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
It's a while ago I read it. But yeah,
Breeze has always been a very tightly coupled LSP and wallet as well, though. So I don't think they'd really differentiate between having a bunch of stuff hosted inside the server and having a bunch of stuff hosted in the wallet. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Breeze.
Yeah. Cool. Were there any other open issues or stuff, or should we wrap it up since we're at the hour anyways?
No, I don't think so.
All good. Cool. Any last words? Otherwise, I'll stop recording here, and it will not be shared on YouTube. Your last words. Okay. Yeah. Press stop here now.